Grateful for Ebere's gesture, Chizoba thanked her and retreated to her room to eat. Unaware of the danger lurking within her meal, she consumed the poisoned soup, oblivious to the sinister intentions of her once trusted friend. Suddenly feeling restless, Tobe makes a quick exit in the middle of an interview. Finding himself miles away in an unfamiliar town, he excuses himself to make a call, driven by an urgent need to contact Chizoba. Despite his supervisor's efforts to get him to focus on the interview at hand, his anxiety worsens, seeping into his bones like an icy chill. Being a cloudy day, the network was really bad. Tobe quickly hurried towards the nearest town hall to use their landline. The sight of the long queue waiting to use the landline intensified Tobe's anxiety. He anxiously waited for his turn, pacing relentlessly, his nerves on edge, until finally it came. With trembling fingers, he dialed Chizoba's number, each ring amplifying his growing fears. He didn't understand why he felt so much fear and worry within him, but it was like Chizoba was calling out to him. But with no answer after several times of calling, Tobe's heart sinks. It's highly unusual for Chizoba to miss his calls. They were like their cherished moments in a day. As panic grips him tighter, Tobe couldn't help but wonder why Ebere, who was most often tied at Chizoba's hip, isn't answering either. The silence on the other end of the line only confirmed Tobe's worst fears. Am I just being paranoid? I'm sure she'll call back when she sees my call, Tobe thought to himself while walking back to the site of the interview, still trying to convince himself to stay. Over at Luamba City, Ebere paces back and forth relentlessly in her slightly dark room, the weight of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. She strains to catch any sign, keeping an ear against the wall to any whisper of confirmation that the potion has indeed taken effect. Anxious feelings of hope and fear intertwine within her, weaving a complex mix of emotions that threaten to consume her. As Ebere is deep in thought, she suddenly jumps when the door opens, her heart pounding so hard in her chest as she sees Chizoba standing there, drenched in blood. Horror washes over her as she takes in the sight before her. Too scared to scream, she feels her feet frozen to the ground, unable to move. Chizoba walks towards Ebere, with a trail of blood dripping down between her legs. Time seems to stand still as Ebere struggles to comprehend the scene unfolding before her. Her mind races, struggling with every strength in her to scream for help, but nothing can be heard. Unable to take her eyes away from the bloody figure in form of Chizoba standing before her, Ebere feels paralyzed. Questions swirl in her mind, desperate for answers that elude her, like, what horrors have transpired? What dark forces have been unleashed? Is Chizoba dead? Is this Chizoba's ghost? As Chizoba moves closer, a silent scream echoes in Ebere's mind, drowning out all other thoughts. The air grows thick with tension, suffocating her. And in that moment, Ebere knows that nothing would ever be the same again. As Chizoba's hands reaches out towards Ebere like a scene from a horror movie, Ebere's natural instinct is basic and instinctive. A piercing scream tears from her throat. Her hand flies over her face in futile attempt to shield herself from the impending terror. But the hands, cold and firm, close around her wrist with an iron grip, pulling her into a nightmare from which she cannot wake. As she dares to peek through trembling fingers, Ebere's wide eyes meet the gaze of Tobichukwu, whose expression etched with concern and confusion. He shakes her profusely, demanding answers she cannot yet provide. Why are you screaming? Where is Chizoba? Answer me, where is Chizoba? Struggling to compose herself, Ebere realizes that it was fear itself that had played a cruel prank on her senses. With a shaky breath, her voice trying so hard to mask the horror she just witnessed seconds ago. Am I Chizoba's keeper? She should be safe and sound inside the room, fast asleep. She had said she needed to rest, Ebere replied, releasing her arm from Tobichukwu's grip. Relief washes over Tobichukwu's features, but his worries remain palpable as he hurries towards he and Chizoba's room, leaving Ebere alone with her racing thoughts and pounding heart. Time seems to stretch endlessly as Ebere awaits in agonizing suspense. Each passing moment waited with a dread of what Tobichukwu might uncover. And then, just as her anxiety threatens to overwhelm her, Tobichukwu let out the loudest scream, sending chills down Ebere's spine. With shaky steps, she approaches their room, bracing herself for the unimaginable. And there, lying in a pool of blood, is Chizoba, and beside her, a small unformed figure lying lifeless, its innocence cut short at the hand of envy. Upon arriving at the hospital, Tobe was accosted by Ebere, who wasted no time in accusing him of focusing too much on work and not paying attention to his wife, leading her to her third miscarriage. A stunned Tobe stood helpless as Ebere's accusations flew, his mind reeling with confusion and disbelief. As Tobe rushed into the doctor's office, his heart pounding with fear and desperation, he braced himself for the worst. Dr. Dede looked at Tobe with so much empathy. Tobe, I really hate to break this news to you, but the baby was too young to be saved. It was only 5 months gone. Your wife is still in critical condition. We should focus on her now. We need to stop the bleeding. Our only option will be to take out her womb. The news struck Tobe like a physical blow, leaving him reeling with shock and despair. Tears welled in his eyes as he struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the news. Doctor, I just need my wife. Womb or no womb. Just promise me you'll do everything to bring her back. We can look for other ways to get the baby. But where do I start from to find another Chizoba? Tobe replied, breaking into a cry as he buries his head into his arms. Dr. Dede pats him on the back and makes a quick exit to commence on the surgery. The surgery stretched on for an excruciating 6 hours, each moment feeling like an eternity. Tobichukwu and Ebere sat anxiously, clinging on any shred of hope for news about Chizoba. Finally, Dr. Dede emerged and confirmed the surgery's success. He called Tobichukwu into his office to discuss the procedure. With grave expression, he explained the complications they encountered during surgery. Dr. Dede revealed that the scarring on the walls of Chizoba's womb resembled deliberate damage, as if someone had intentionally sought to terminate her pregnancy. Shocked by this revelation, Tobe struggled to comprehend why Chizoba would take such drastic measures. After Dr. Dede's advice for Tobichukwu to return home and come back later in the evening, he left the office with a head full of unanswered questions. Despite the uncertainty, he found himself back at the hospital in the evening ready to see Chizoba. When Chizoba woke up from surgery, she was disoriented at first, but as the reality of her situation sunk in, shock and disbelief washed over her. upon realizing her womb had been removed. In that moment, her voice disappeared, and she fell into a stunned silence, her eyes vacant as she stared into space. Emotionless and mute, Chizoba seemed to be struggling with a sense of loss and confusion. However, Tobe's return to the hospital didn't bring the loving reunion he hoped for. Chizoba was furious with his decision to agree to the removal of her womb, fueled by the fear of never being able to conceive again. Meanwhile, Tobe struggled with the painful realization that Chizoba had undergone the procedure to terminate their pregnancy. He couldn't shake off the questions about her potential involvement in their past miscarriages, leaving him puzzled and conflicted. As Chizoba battled with her depression, the weight of Dr. Dede's words hung heavily over the both of them, casting a dark shadow over their once bright future. Tobe's heart ached with grief as he confronted the magnitude of their loss, their dreams of starting a family shattered. Despite Tobe's attempts to reassure Chizoba of his love and loyalty, his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Chizoba remained emotionally distant, lost in her inner turmoil, and their once strong connection began to fade away. As the months passed, Chizoba remained silent, her voice stolen by the shock she endured. Despite the passage of time, she found herself still battling with depression, struggling to overcome the trauma she had experienced. Meanwhile, the cracks in Chizoba and Tobe's marriage continued to widen. Tobe turned to alcohol to numb his pain, drowning his sorrows in its temporary relief. Witnessing his vulnerability, Ebere seized the opportunity to insert herself into his life, becoming his sole confidant amidst the chaos of their deteriorating relationship. From the sidelines, Ebere observed Tobe's downward spiral, his reliance on alcohol growing as he sought solace from the crumbling foundation of his marriage. In the midst of his turmoil, Ebere's presence offered him a semblance of comfort and understanding, drawing him further into the web of their complex dynamics. In moments of weakness, Tobe turned to Ebere for comfort. His guard lowered by the haze of alcohol, he confided in her about his mistrust for Chizoba and the troubles of their once happy union. Little did he know that his confessions were fueling Ebere's twisted desires, driving her to pursue him with reckless abandon. As Tobe's marriage faltered, Ebere's advances equally became more persuasive. Tobe began to feel uneasy in her presence, sensing the ulterior motives behind her actions. Despite his reservations, Tobe found himself drawn to Ebere's flattery and attention. In a moment of weakness, fueled by alcohol and loneliness, he succumbed to her advances, crossing a line that he could never undo. Their drunken night together marked the beginning of their affair, a secret that will haunt them both in the days to come. But as their affair progressed, Ebere began to grow disillusioned with Tobe's behavior. She resented his sneaky attitude and his visible pain over the state of his marriage. She couldn't bear the fact that he still harbored feelings for Chizoba, even as he sought solace in her arms. The more Ebere saw Tobe's pleas for forgiveness and his desire to salvage his marriage, the more Ebere's anger and resentment grew. She felt betrayed by Tobe's lingering affection for his wife, unable to reconcile the man she loved with the one who was willing to betray her for the sake of their illicit affair. In the early hours of the morning, Chizoba woke up feeling restless, her mind consumed by the issues plaguing her marriage. Determined to confront Tobe, she searched the house, her heart racing with worry. Eventually, she stumbled upon Tobe and Ebere engaged in a tense conversation. Hidden in the shadows, Chizoba listened in silence as Ebere issued a bitter ultimatum, demanding that Tobe choose between her and Chizoba, threatening to expose their affair and leave with her pregnancy if he didn't comply. Tobe pleaded with Ebere, arguing that Chizoba didn't deserve such treatment after all she had been through. But Ebere remained resolute, packing her bags in preparation to leave. Shocked and broken by the betrayal unfolding before her, Chizoba stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. In that moment of despair, she let out a cry, her voice seemingly returning to her. Startled by the sound, Tobe and Ebere emerged from their conversation to find Chizoba, heartbroken and in tears. As she ran out of the house, desperate to escape the pain, Tobe chased after her, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the air, signaling tragedy. Chizoba had fallen victim to a hit-and-run accident, leaving Tobe and Ebere struggling with the devastating consequences of their actions. And for the second time, Tobe gathered what remained of Chizoba and rushed her to the hospital in a taxi. Hope flickered faintly as they reached the hospital doors, but tragically, right there, Chizoba took her last breath. As her wedding ring slipped from her lifeless hand, it felt like a dagger piercing Tobe's chest. He stood frozen, watching helplessly as medical staff frantically tried to resuscitate her. Covered in Chizoba's blood, Tobe felt as if he were in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. With trembling steps, he walked the long, desolate distance back home, consumed by fear of facing the inevitable news of Chizoba's passing. Each step weighed heavy with grief and regret, the weight of his loss crushing him with every heartbeat. As months passed and Chizoba was laid to rest, Ebere stepped into the role of Tobe's wife, moving into their home despite Tobe's reluctance to let her into their matrimonial bedroom. The house remained haunted by memories of Chizoba, with her pictures still adorning the walls and her belongings untouched. Ebere found herself tormented by guilt, feeling responsible for Chizoba's death as she witnessed the reminders of the woman she had displaced. Tobe's grief manifested in his overdrinking, seeking solace in alcohol as he punished himself for his perceived role in Chizoba's demise. Despite Ebere's pregnancy, Tobe remained emotionally distant, refusing to provide her with the affection and attention she craved. Her constant nagging about his unavailability only served to deepen the rift between them. As Ebere's delivery date approached, her desperation for Tobe's affection intensified, but his cold demeanor left her feeling unfulfilled in the marriage she had envisioned. The man she had fallen in love with seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a shell of his former self. It was as if the Tobe she knew died alongside Chizoba, leaving behind only a shadow of his former self. The realization dawned on Ebere with crushing weight. Even in death, she remained a mere bystander in Tobe's heart, forever overshadowed by the memory of Chizoba. Exhausted by the weight of a love that seemed unattainable, she gathered her belongings, ready to leave for the hospital to deliver her baby. When Dr. Dede inquired about Tobe's whereabouts, Ebere reassured him that Tobe would soon arrive, emphasizing her belief that the birth of their baby would mark a new beginning for him. However, with labor setting in, waiting became unbearable, and they proceeded with preparing Ebere for delivery. As the labor pains intensified, Ebere's mind drifted to Chizoba, imagining the agony she must have endured the day she ingested the poison. She envisioned the loneliness Chizoba must have felt as she lay bleeding on the floor, and the heartache of overhearing Ebere's conversation with Tobe. The weight of guilt and remorse washed over Ebere as she struggled with the repercussions of her actions, even in the midst of bringing new life into the world. 15 agonizing hours dragged by as Ebere endured relentless intensity of labor pains. Gripped by fear of surgery and consumed by the dread that she might not survive, Ebere felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. In a moment of raw honesty, she pulled Dr. Dede close and whispered the truth. "I poisoned Chizoba. This is actually my punishment." Dr. Dede recalled in shock, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of Ebere's confession. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and he understood the truth behind the tangled web of events that had unfolded. Ebere's cry pierced the air, echoing the turmoil within her soul. Just then, the door swung open. A cold sensation ran through Ebere's spine. Chizoba entered the room. With extended hands, she beckoned Ebere to her side, offering forgiveness and solace. Overwhelmed by Chizoba's grace, Ebere embraced her, tears streaming down her face. "It's fine, Ebere. I forgive you. It's all in the past now," Chizoba assured her. Filled with a sense of peace, Ebere invited Chizoba to meet her newborn baby. But as she turned, her heart froze in horror. Her lifeless body lay on the bed, sacrificed in the process of bringing her child into the world, a beautiful baby girl. In that moment of shocking realization, Ebere understood the price of her actions. Tobe entered the room, oblivious to Chizoba and Ebere's ghost standing next to him. He was greeted by the sight of his newborn daughter cradled in Dr. Dede's arms. Tobe cradled his daughter. "I will name her Chizoba," as he kissed her forehead. Ebere and Chizoba shared a final smile while holding hands. They vanished into the unknown, whistling to the tune of their childhood African melody, leaving behind a world forever changed by their intertwined fates. This will be the end of this story. I will end this session as usual with moral lessons. There's a saying that goes, "Two is partnership, three is a crowd." This reminds us that adding someone else in a close relationship can make things tricky. In the story, Ebere's presence created problems between Tobe and Chizoba. But it's not just about having fewer people, it's about the quality of the relationship. When Tobe and Chizoba were alone, they were happy. Adding Ebere changed everything and made things harder. The second moral lesson I would back up with an adage that goes, "No two relationships are the same." This speaks volumes to Ebere's situation and her expectation of being treated identically to Chizoba by Tobe. It highlights the uniqueness of every relationship, the individual dynamics, the experiences, and connections that shape them. Just as apples and oranges differ in taste, texture, and appearance, so do relationships vary in their dynamics and interactions. This serves as a reminder that expecting identical treatment in different relationships is unrealistic, and it disregards the unique qualities and dynamics that define each connection. Until you can recognize and respect the uniqueness of every relationship, only then will you have a deeper understanding and appreciation of the complexities of human connections. The third lesson is to err as human to forgive divine. This proverb highlights the themes of guilt, forgiveness, and redemption explored in the story. Ebere's confession and Chizoba's forgiveness exemplifies the human capacity for both wrongdoing and compassion. I would love to know what you learned from this story in its entirety. Please comment on what you learned and what you would have done differently. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, bye.